You know, I think I owe this watch an apology. I waited 4 years to buy this watch when really I should have just cleared everything and gotten it as soon as I could. Because this is an amazing watch. Hi everyone and welcome to Shah Lusso, and today we are talking about the Zenith Defy Classic. And yes, this is a watch I've reviewed before on the channel in its skeleton version, but let's see what I've learned in the last 4 years. Starting off with the history, this watch was released in 2018 at Basel World, and it was a complete reinventing of the Defy line. Throughout the 2000s, the Defy watches were big, bulky, massive watches. They took the commanding presence of the original 1969 version and then just filled it with steroids. Meanwhile, when they released it in 2018, everything was much sleeker and much more modern. Released entirely in titanium and measuring 41 millimeters, this was a much more wearable watch than its predecessor. It was also only 10.7 millimeters thick, so this watch actually does play in the similar sort of arena to when you think of other integrated steel sports watches like the Laureato or maybe even the Royal Oak and some Nautilus variants. And before you get into any crazy comparisons, it's important to remember this watch does take its inspiration from a 1969 design, so predating the Royal Oak even. However, this particular variant doesn't include the 12-sided bezel. Instead, this has a rounded bezel, but it does include that cushion shape as well as the bracelet that's perfectly integrated into the case, but without needing a proprietary strap. More on that a little bit later. At the time of release, this was probably the best time for Zenith. They needed a little bit of a reinvention. They needed something to draw away some attention from the El Primero, which was really their only claim to fame at that point. And they needed something that could compete in this integrated sports watch craze that was bubbling at 2018. And this was a perfect candidate for it. Available with a blue dial or with an open work dial. This really took the fight to the likes of AP, for example, obviously at a reduced price, but still competing so much on the details and on the finishing. When you do a wrist roll with this watch, it's like a disco ball. You can see so many different facets that are just shining off of the light, but it's never something that jumps out. Because most of the face of the bracelet and the case are all satin finished, you just get these little sparkles that just show you that something's happening there. It's an insane balance that only a few models actually really achieve, and this I believe is one of them. On top of that, on both models you have these floating indices which just hover above. On the skeleton model it's a little bit more par for the course, but when you see it on the closed dial variant, it's something you don't see on a lot of watches. We're so used to seeing indices just sit on, and these are only hovering probably 0.5 millimeter above the dial, but it just adds that extra level of theater to the watch that you don't see on every watch. I mentioned earlier that this watch was also a way to get away from the El Primero being sort of the only face of the brand, and this did that by not even using an El Primero movement. On the inside it has the caliber Elite 670SK, and interestingly, on both the open version and the skeleton version, they both feature opened up bridges on the case backside. Obviously, the skeletonized version features an entirely open dial, so you can actually see directly through it. One of the best places to see this is actually where you can see the silicone escapement, which is even shaped like a Zenith star and colored in purple, just to make sure you didn't miss it. At 28.8, it's a viable, tried and tested frequency. It is a three-hander, it has a bidirectional quickset, which is quite useful. For someone like me, who I have a few different watches that I change quite regularly, so I often have to reset my watches, it's nice that if I make a mistake, I can always backtrack instead of having to cycle through the whole month again. And with 50 hours of power reserve, honestly, it's not that bad. Even if you leave it for the weekend, if you're quick, you can have a decent chance of still not having to wind it if you want to just put it straight on. But what really stands out in terms of actually having this watch and owning it is just the lightness. I've owned this watch now for a bit over 6 months, and I still can't get over how incredibly light it is. It baffles me every single time I wear it. When I put this on a strap, it's like there's nothing on my wrist. The strap, I think, weighs more than the watch. No joke. I do have to point out though, while I did say earlier this doesn't have proprietary lugs, it does have complicated lugs. The integration is achieved by having a little end-link piece that is screwed on by two minute screws. And to add insult to injury, it's a different end-link for the bracelet or for the strap version. Now, I bought the bracelet version, so I got the bracelet end links included. But when I wanted to put this on a strap, if I wanted that perfect integration with the official straps, I had to spend 180 euros on getting two end links and fitting them with these minute screws, of which one already failed once and I actually nearly lost the end link. So when we talk about pros and cons, that I would say is the biggest con. Changing straps, not a breeze on this watch, but it does look good when you achieve it. And my God, does it look good all the time. Whether it's on the bracelet, whether it's on the strap, I just love looking at this watch. I cannot stress enough, it is just a work of art, even when it's just sitting down. It's a statue, it stands up on its own bracelet if you sit it on the bracelet. There's just so much to admire in it, and I love the sort of darker shade of metal that titanium gives it. The blue dial just looks amazing in every possible light. It's an uncluttered dial, but somehow there's still so much to see. Now, as for why I ended up getting the blue dial versus the Skeleton, well, I reviewed the Skeleton before and I stand by what I said. I love it, it looks amazing, but a Skeleton is always on. So unless you really want that, it's not always something that you want to see all the time, and that's why I ended up getting the closed dial, because my watch collection is relatively small, so I don't need something that sort of boxes me into anything. I still need a bit of versatility, and this serves that purpose to a T. This is, after all, the watch that I replaced my beloved Seamaster with. Now, if you want to hear more about why I sold my Seamaster, check out my video for that. Also, in terms of legibility, while the Skeleton does have very good legibility for an open work dial, this is just next level. It's so easy to read because there's nothing else happening on the dial to distract you. The Skeleton, though, is for the person who just wants to observe and look at that dial. Forget looking at the time. Just enjoy the mechanics of it. If that's what you want, I would say go for the Skeleton hands down. If you have a bigger collection, Skeleton hands down. But as an all-rounder, it's completely shaken up my collection, and 2024 will reflect that. But one last thing that really, for me, makes this Zenith something super special is that this was the very first watch that was lent into me for this channel. So when I very first started this channel, I borrowed watches from family, I used the watches that I had, and that was about it. Really, things didn't take off content-wise until I actually was able to borrow watches from stores. And the Defy Classic was the first watch featured on this channel that didn't belong to anyone I knew, and it was actually a store that lent it to me. And of course, this time is no different. Today's Defy Skeleton was lent into me by CHRONEXT, so make sure you check their links in the description below and see what they have to offer, because they have a huge range of watches, including lots of really cool Zeniths. So in many ways, this for me serves as a reminder of what this channel has given me. At the end of the day, I wouldn't have this watch, I wouldn't even have the job that I have now if I didn't have this channel. So for me, this is a reminder that, in my view, is much more important than the first watch that got me into the hobby. But let me know in the comments below, what are your thoughts on the Zenith Defy Classic? Of course, if you like this video, then make sure you like it and share it. If you want to see more pictures and infographics about watches, then make sure you follow me on Instagram at Shah Lusso. If you want to see more videos of watches, make sure you subscribe to the channel and hit that notification bell as well, and check out my playlist for more related content. But thank you for joining me on this quick overview of, in my view, one of the best watches, a watch so good that I actually put my own money into it, the Zenith Defy Classic. Catch you on the next video.